He looked at me and said, "If you can't handle my past, maybe you're not woman enough for my present." I didn't raise my voice, I didn't cry, I didn't even argue. I just smiled. Not because it was funny, but because in that exact second, I knew this conversation was already over. "You're right about one thing," I said calmly. Then I walked to my home office, opened a drawer he'd never bothered to look inside, and pulled out a neatly organized folder I'd been adding to it for weeks. Tabs, dates, copies, notes, everything documented. When I placed it on the table in front of him, his confidence cracked. "What's this?" he asked, already uneasy. "Divorce papers," I said, "filed 5 weeks ago." He laughed at first, a short, dismissive sound. "You're bluffing." I didn't respond. I just waited while he flipped through the pages, until his eyes landed on the filing date. 5 weeks ago. The color drained from his face. "That was before this conversation," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "It was also before you told me I was too weak to handle the truth." He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. In a way, he was. What he didn't understand, what he never understood, was that I hadn't acted on impulse. I hadn't reacted emotionally. I'd prepared quietly, methodically, while giving him chance after chance to come clean. Because I already knew. I knew about the letters that kept arriving at our house, addressed to him, but under a name he swore didn't matter. I knew about the marriage he claimed never existed. I knew about the debt, the lies, the carefully curated version of himself he'd sold me for years. And while he thought I was just being sensitive, suspicious, dramatic, I was calling lawyers, moving documents, separating finances, and waiting. Waiting to see if he would finally choose honesty. He didn't. Instead, he chose to insult me. So when he asked, shaking now, "You've been planning this the whole time?" I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "I've been preparing, while you kept lying." That was the moment he realized something far more terrifying than divorce. He had underestimated me, and he was about to pay for it. Before the lies, before the paperwork, before I learned how quiet betrayal can be, there was a barbecue. That's how it always starts, doesn't it? Something ordinary enough that you never see the ending coming. We met through mutual friends on a warm afternoon that smelled like grilled meat and sunscreen. I remember noticing him because he wasn't loud. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He stood slightly apart from the group, drink in hand, listening more than talking. When our friend introduced us, he smiled like he was genuinely happy to be there, and that alone felt refreshing. We talked about work first. He told me he had a stable job, that he liked structure, liked knowing where he stood. I liked that. I was at a point in my life where chaos had lost its charm. He asked questions, real ones, about my goals, my family, whether I wanted kids someday. I told him yes, maybe, when the timing felt right. He nodded like that answer mattered. For the first year, everything felt solid. He was consistent, called when he said he would, showed up on time, introduced me to his family early, which I took as a good sign. They were close, intense, but close. His mother hugged too tightly. His sister asked a few too many questions. I brushed it off as concern. He talked about wanting a future, about settling down, about doing things the right way. When he proposed after a year, it didn't feel rushed. It felt intentional, like we were choosing each other with open eyes. We got married the following year, a small ceremony, nothing flashy. I remember standing there, looking at him, thinking how lucky I was to have found someone steady, someone safe. The first couple of years were peaceful. We built routines, shared dinners, weekend errands, conversations about savings and trips we'd take someday. He told me about his job history, how he'd worked his way up, how proud his family was of him. He spoke carefully about his past, but not evasively. At least that's what I thought then. He never mentioned a previous marriage. Not once. No passing reference. No, I was young and stupid. No complicated story. Nothing. When I talked about honesty, about how important transparency was to me, he agreed easily. Too easily, in hindsight. Like someone repeating the right answers without understanding the weight behind them. 6 months ago, the first letter arrived. It was addressed to him, but under a last name I didn't recognize. Not his current one. Not anything he'd ever mentioned. I asked casually, holding it out while making dinner. "Hey, we got mail for someone with your first name but a different last name. Do you know them?" He barely looked. "Oh, that's nothing. Junk mail. They mess that up all the time." He tossed it in the trash without hesitation. Something about that moment stayed with me. Not panic, just unease. A quiet tug in my chest. Then more letters came. Court documents. Collection notices. Official envelopes that didn't look like mistakes. Each time there was an explanation, someone else with the same name, old records, clerical errors. I wanted to believe him. I loved him. I trusted the man I thought I married. But trust, I would learn, is a luxury you can't afford when the truth is being hidden from you piece by piece. And while he thought I was letting it go, while he thought I was naive enough to accept half answers, I was starting to pay attention. Really pay attention. Because the life I believed we'd built together was beginning to feel staged. And I was about to find out just how much of it was fiction. At first, the doubts came quietly. They didn't announce themselves as panic or fear. They showed up as small pauses in conversation, as moments where his answers felt slightly rehearsed, like he'd practiced them before I even asked the question. The letters kept coming. Not constantly, not enough to cause a scene, just often enough to remind me that something hadn't been resolved. Each envelope carried that same unfamiliar last name. Each one looked official, heavy, important. Every time I brought it up carefully. Another one came today, I'd say, keeping my tone light. Do you want to open it this time? He'd sigh, irritated, not worried. It's nothing, I told you. That was the first real red flag. Not the denial, but the dismissal. The way my concern annoyed him more than the problem itself. I started noticing other inconsistencies. He'd mentioned having a master's degree when we first met. One night over dinner, I asked what his thesis had been on. A normal question, a curious one. He froze for half a second, just long enough. Research-heavy stuff, he said vaguely. It's been years. Years, but not enough to forget something that defined your education. I let it go, or at least I pretended to. At work, I deal with details. Policies, timelines, paper trails. It's trained me to recognize when something doesn't add up, not emotionally, but structurally. His stories had structure problems, dates that slid around, jobs that overlapped too neatly, gaps explained with confidence instead of clarity. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I listened. I watched how he reacted when I asked follow-up questions, how his tone sharpened, how quickly he reframed my curiosity as suspicion. Why are you always digging? He snapped once. Do you not trust me? That question landed heavier than it should have, because trust wasn't something I was trying to take from him. It was something I was trying to hold on to. The final push came when another envelope arrived. This one wasn't vague. It was unmistakably legal. Court documents. My hands shook slightly as I turned it over, feeling the weight of what it represented. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table alone, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I stared at that envelope and made a decision I never thought I'd make about the person I loved. I ran a background check. It wasn't dramatic, no hacking, no spying, just public records, things anyone could access if they knew where to look. And once I started, the information unfolded with a brutal, mechanical honesty. He had been married before, not divorced, still legally married in another state. The name on the letters wasn't a mistake. It was his legal last name from that marriage. A marriage he'd never mentioned, a marriage that, according to court records, had never been finalized. There were lawsuits, debt, medical bills from a surgery his wife, his other wife, had undergone while they were still married, $40,000. His name listed as responsible. I felt sick, not just betrayed, but humiliated, like I'd been living in a story where entire chapters were missing, and everyone else somehow knew. I reached out to a friend, a paralegal, under the guise of needing help understanding public filings. She confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deception. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't wake him up and demand answers. I closed my laptop, folded my hands, and sat there in the dark. Because now I understood something crucial. This wasn't one lie. It was a system of lies. And systems don't collapse on their own. They have to be dismantled, carefully. I didn't confront him the night I found out. That surprised me more than anything else. I lay beside him in bed, staring at the ceiling, while his breathing stayed slow and even, like nothing in the world had shifted. Meanwhile, my mind kept replaying court filings, dates, names, facts that didn't care whether I was ready for them or not. By morning, the shock had settled into something colder. Clarity. I didn't want excuses. I didn't want another story polished just enough to make me doubt myself. I wanted to see what he would do if I gave him one last, clean chance to tell the truth. So I waited. For the next few weeks, I acted normal, intentionally normal. I laughed when he joked, asked about his day, cooked dinner, sat across from him at the table like my entire understanding of our marriage hadn't just been shattered. While he thought nothing had changed, I was preparing. Quietly. I contacted a lawyer. I began documenting everything: screenshots, public records, timelines of contradictions. I moved my personal documents to my office. I organized my finances. I learned exactly what my options were. And still, I gave him openings. About a month before everything finally detonated, I sat across from him one evening and slid a printed document across the kitchen table. A marriage certificate. His name. That unfamiliar last name. A date from years before we ever met. His eyes dropped to the page, then snapped back up. "Why are you digging into my past?" he demanded. "That's ancient history." "Were you married before?" I asked, keeping my voice level. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossing like armor. Not surprised. Defensive. "It doesn't matter now." "It matters because you never told me." That's when his expression hardened, not with guilt, but with irritation. He scoffed. "Women like you can't handle men with complicated pasts." The words hit like a slap, not because they hurt, but because they revealed everything. This wasn't about a forgotten detail, this was about control. "I don't want perfection," I said. "I want honesty." "Well, I'm sorry I'm not perfect," he snapped. "Maybe if you weren't so judgmental, I would have felt safe telling you." And just like that, the narrative flipped. Suddenly, I was the problem. My questions were attacks. My need for truth was insecurity. I walked away from that conversation knowing something essential had died. Hope. From then on, I stopped waiting for him to do the right thing. 3 days ago, he came home from what he called a work trip, one I was almost certain had actually been about the lawsuit tied to his still active marriage. "How was your trip?" I asked. "Fine," he said sharply. "Stop interrogating me." "I'm just asking about your day." "You're always suspicious," he snapped. "It's exhausting." The words settled between us like a verdict. "Maybe I wouldn't be suspicious if you were honest," I said quietly. That's when he said it. The sentence that ended everything. "If you can't handle my past, maybe you're not woman enough for my present." Something inside me went perfectly still. I smiled. "You're right about one thing," I said. I walked to my office, opened the drawer, and came back with the folder I'd been building for 5 weeks. "What's that?" he asked, already uneasy. "Divorce papers," I said, placing them on the table. "Filed 5 weeks ago. Court dates in 3 weeks. He flipped through them quickly, confident at first, then frozen. "5 weeks?" he said. "That was before any of this." "Yes," I replied. "I found out about your previous marriage 2 months ago. All of it." His jaw tightened, not grief, not remorse. Anger. "So you've been planning this behind my back?" "I've been preparing," I said, "while giving you chances to come clean." "This is insane," he snapped. "You can't divorce me over my past." "I'm divorcing you for lying," I said calmly. "About your marriage, your debts, your education, your job history. You built our entire relationship on deception." He tried to argue, to explain, to minimize. When I mentioned the word bigamy, his confidence finally faltered. He hadn't thought that far. "I need you to move out by the end of the month," I said. "The house is in my name, purchased before we married." "Where am I supposed to go?" "Maybe your wife can help you figure it out." I left that night, checked into a hotel, and for the first time in weeks I slept because the truth was finally out in the open. The silence after I closed the door behind me was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. It followed me down the hallway, into the elevator, into the hotel room where I finally sat on the edge of the bed and let myself breathe. Not cry, not collapse, just breathe. Slow, measured breaths, like I was relearning how to exist outside the version of life I'd been living. I checked my phone once. 39 missed calls. Texts stacked on top of each other so fast they blurred into noise. Apologies at first. Then confusion, then accusation. "We need to talk, you blindsided me. This isn't how adults handle problems. You're being cold." I didn't respond. My lawyer's voice echoed in my head. "Document everything. Do not engage." So I didn't. The next morning, I returned to the house briefly, only to grab clothes. I moved through the rooms carefully, like a guest. Everything looked the same. His shoes by the door, his jacket over the chair, the life we'd built still sitting there, intact on the surface. But I knew better now. Every object felt like evidence. Every memory felt contaminated. He wasn't home. That was intentional on my part. My lawyer had advised distance until the court date. No conversations without witnesses. No emotional confrontations that could be twisted later. By midday, the tone of his messages shifted. The apologies disappeared. "You're being cruel. A real woman would at least hear me out. You don't get to erase 5 years like this." There it was. Entitlement. Not remorse, expectation. He He believed he was owed my time, my patience, my forgiveness. I blocked his number. That didn't stop him. He started calling from unknown numbers, from his mother's phone, from his sister's. I let them ring out. Every missed call was another line added to the record. By day 4, the escalation arrived right on schedule. Security called my office to tell me there were 2 people in the lobby demanding to see me. His mother was crying when I got there. Loud, theatrical sobs that drew attention. His sister stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Please," his mother said, grabbing my hands. "You have to give him another chance." I gently pulled away. "Your son is still legally married to someone else," I said evenly. "That makes this marriage fraudulent." His sister scoffed. "People mess up paperwork during divorces all the time, and people tell their partners about previous marriages," I replied. He didn't. Their faces shifted when I mentioned the debts, the lawsuits, the education lies, the job history he'd fabricated. "You knew about that?" I asked his mother quietly. Her expression answered before her mouth did. Security escorted them out after I made it clear they were not to return. My boss was understanding, firm, protective. Another reminder that I wasn't alone the way he wanted me to feel. That night I saw the posts. He'd gone public. Vague statements. Carefully worded. "Hardest time of my life. Being judged for my past. Some people can't forgive." The comments were split. Sympathy, confusion, praise for his strength. I didn't respond. But my friends did. Nothing detailed, just enough. "That's not the whole story. There's more you're not saying." He deleted the comments, locked his profile. Day 7 brought the first real attempt at retaliation. The bank called. Someone had tried to transfer the entire balance of our joint account into a personal account, from a device that had never accessed it before. His work laptop. I drove straight to the bank with the divorce filing in hand. They couldn't freeze the account without a court order. "So withdraw it," I said. "All of it." It was legal. Either party could. I deposited the money into my personal account at a different bank. 2 hours later, he called from his mother's phone. "You stole from me." "No," I said calmly. "I withdrew my money from an account you tried to drain first." "That was household money." "Past tense," I replied. "We don't have a household anymore." He accused me of abandoning him, of leaving him destitute, of financial abuse. "You have a job," I said. "Use your paycheck." "My wages are already garnished." So the collectors had found him. "Not my problem. I'm going to tell everyone what you really are," he snapped. "I have documentation," I said, "and a lawyer who's very interested in your still active marriage." I hung up. Blocked that number too. By the end of the week, I felt something unexpected settle into my chest. Not grief, not rage. Resolve, because I wasn't reacting anymore. I was responding. And I was ready for whatever came next. The moment emotion stopped working for him, he turned to paperwork. Day 8 started with a call from my attorney. "I'm guessing you haven't heard yet," she said, already sounding amused. "He filed something, didn't he?" "An emergency motion," she replied. "Temporary spousal support. Exclusive use of the house." I closed my eyes slowly. Of course he had. According to the filing, I had ambushed him with divorce papers, drained our joint account without warning, and left him with no financial means to support himself. The narrative painted him as blindsided, vulnerable, and abandoned. Trapped in a marriage he didn't understand was in danger. It would have been almost impressive if it hadn't been so predictable. "He wants $3,000 a month," my lawyer continued, "plus exclusive occupancy of the house." I actually laughed. "Can he get it?" "Unlikely," she said, "but we'll respond formally." The response was thorough, methodical, brutal in its simplicity. Bank records showing his attempt to drain the joint account first. Text messages from weeks earlier where I confronted him about the previous marriage. His responses, deflecting, accusing, gaslighting. Public records showing the unresolved marriage in another state. Court filings outlining the debt he never disclosed. A timeline proving I'd given him weeks to come clean. "This motion actually helps us," my lawyer said. "It shows entitlement and panic." Meanwhile, his campaign didn't stop at the courts. He started reaching out to mutual friends, telling them I'd served papers out of nowhere, that I was punishing him for old mistakes, that I'd always been controlling, suspicious, invasive. One friend called me directly. "What actually happened?" she asked carefully. I told her the truth, just the facts. He'd been married before, never told me. Still legally married when we wed. Lied about his education, job history, and debts. There was a long pause. "Holy crap," she finally said. "Yeah, that's grounds for divorce." Word traveled faster after that. His sister tried contacting me through LinkedIn of all places. I ignored it. Then came the hearing. I walked into the courtroom calm. focused, prepared. He was already there, sitting upright, jaw tight, projecting control. No tears, no shame, just that familiar sense of grievance, like the world had failed him. His attorney spoke first. Your Honor, my client was served with divorce papers without warning. His wife drained their joint bank account, leaving him without resources. He is seeking temporary support to survive while these proceedings move forward. My lawyer stood. Your Honor, may I present evidence that directly contradicts this narrative? And she did, one document at a time. The judge reviewed everything quietly, carefully, then looked directly at him. You attempted to empty the joint account before your wife did, the judge said. He shifted. I was securing funds because I knew she was planning to leave me with nothing. The bank flagged your attempt, the judge replied evenly. She withdrew the funds after that. Silence. And you were served papers 4 weeks ago, the judge continued, which gave you time to make arrangements. His attorney tried to pivot. Your Honor, my client has significant debt and, my lawyer interjected gently, debt from a previous marriage he never disclosed, a marriage that, according to court records, was never legally terminated. The judge paused. Is that correct? She asked him. His confidence cracked, not emotionally, but strategically. It's complicated. Do you have divorce papers from your first marriage? No. The judge leaned back. Then you may have committed bigamy when you married the petitioner. That word landed heavy. His attorney leaned toward him, whispering urgently. The judge didn't wait. Emergency motion for spousal support and exclusive use of the home is denied. Relief washed through me. Not explosive, not triumphant, just steady. In the hallway afterward, he tried to corner me. You're destroying my life, he snapped. You destroyed it yourself, I replied calmly. Everyone thinks I'm a terrible person now. Maybe because you did terrible things. I made mistakes, he said sharply. I'm human. Mistakes are accidental, I said. Lies are choices. Security stepped in before it escalated further. The final divorce hearing came the following week. This time, he showed up with a new lawyer, aggressive, confident, clearly paid for by someone else. Probably his mother. The strategy shifted. They tried to paint me as controlling, invasive, unreasonable for digging into sealed records. My lawyer shut that down immediately. His previous marriage was public record, she said, as are the outstanding lawsuits. Then came the asset breakdown. House, purchased by me before the marriage. Car, mine, purchased pre-marriage. Car, his, leased in his name. Retirement, mine, funded independently. Debt, none in my name. Over $40,000 in his. Then the final blow. Your Honor, my lawyer said, the respondent never legally terminated his first marriage. This marriage may be void. The courtroom went silent. The judge looked at him. Are you still legally married to your first spouse? Silence. I'll take that as a yes, the judge said. This marriage is annulled. Not divorced. Erased. He got nothing, because legally it had never existed. And for the first time since this began, I felt the escalation end, because there was nothing left for him to take. The silence after the annulment was louder than any argument we'd had. There was no victory lap, no rush of relief, no moment where I felt triumphant walking out of the courthouse. What followed instead was an empty stretch of days where everything slowed down, like my body was finally processing what my mind had been holding back for months. I went back to the house alone, not to reconcile, not to reminisce, to pack. The rooms looked exactly the same, but they no longer felt familiar. The couch where we used to sit felt too wide. The kitchen table where I'd slid the marriage certificate across to him felt cold, stripped of meaning. Even the bedroom, once shared, now just a space with walls, felt foreign. I moved quietly, folding clothes, sorting papers, opening drawers I hadn't touched in years. Every object carried a memory that didn't hurt sharply anymore, but weighed me down all the same. That was the darkest part. Not heartbreak. Disorientation. I kept replaying moments from the past 5 years, searching for the point where I should have known, where the lie should have been obvious, where my instincts should have screamed louder. How did I miss it? How did I love someone who didn't exist? At night, sleep came in fragments. I'd wake up with my heart racing, convinced I'd forgotten something important, another document, another detail that could come back to haunt me. I checked my phone compulsively, half expecting another legal notice, another attempt to pull me back into chaos. But there was nothing. No calls, no texts, no messages from his family. The sudden silence was unsettling in its own way. I found out why a few days later. A mutual friend called, not to gossip, but to warn me. He's telling people you destroyed him, she said carefully. that you humiliated him, that he never saw it coming. I closed my eyes. Of course he was. In his version of the story, he was still the victim, still blindsided, still entitled to sympathy, and even knowing the truth, I felt a familiar twist in my chest. Not guilt, but exhaustion. I didn't correct the narrative. I didn't defend myself. I didn't have the energy. That was when the doubt crept in. Not about leaving him, but about myself. Had I become someone cold? Someone calculating? Had protecting myself turned me into the thing he accused me of being? One night, sitting alone on the floor of the half-packed living room, I finally let myself feel it. The grief. Not for him, but for the life I thought I had, for the future I planned. With someone who never gave me the truth to build it on. For the years I invested with good faith, unaware I was standing on unstable ground. My chest tightened, my hands trembled, not dramatically, not loudly, just enough to remind me that I was human. I didn't cry for him. I cried for the version of myself who trusted completely. The woman who believed love was enough to guarantee honesty. The woman who thought asking questions meant safety, not suspicion. That night, I called my therapist. I told her everything, not the legal details, not the drama, but the quiet fear underneath it all. What if I can't trust myself again? I asked. She paused before answering. You trusted because you're capable of honesty, she said. That's not a flaw. He exploited it. That doesn't make you weak. It makes him dangerous. The word stayed with me. Dangerous. Not cruel, not broken. Dangerous. Because lies like his don't just deceive, they reshape reality. They make you doubt your own perception, your own judgment, your own worth. In the following days, the loneliness peaked. Friends checked in, but I kept conversations short. My parents were supportive without pushing. They didn't ask for details. They didn't tell me how strong I was supposed to feel. They just let me exist in the quiet. And in that quiet, something uncomfortable settled in. Acceptance. The truth was over. The fight was done. There was nothing left to prove. And yet I had never felt more exposed. Because now there was no distraction, no crisis, no legal battle to focus on. Just me. And the reality that the person I married had never really been there at all. That was the lowest point. Not when he lied, not when he tried to take everything, but when I realized I had to rebuild my sense of trust from the inside out. The turning point didn't arrive with an argument or a revelation. It came quietly, on an ordinary morning, when I realized I hadn't thought about him first thing after waking up. That startled me more than any court ruling ever had. I was standing in the kitchen, coffee brewing, sunlight cutting across the counter, when it hit me. My chest wasn't tight. My thoughts weren't racing. There was no urge to check my phone, no reflexive scan for incoming chaos. For the first time since everything unraveled, my nervous system had gone still. And in that stillness, clarity followed. I hadn't lost anything. I'd escaped. That realization reframed everything. I sat down with my laptop, not to check court updates, not to reread documents, but to close files, old folders, screenshots I no longer needed, timelines that had served their purpose. I archived them carefully, not out of fear, but out of finality. Later that day, my lawyer called. The annulment is finalized, she said. There's nothing more for you to do. I thanked her and hung up, expecting relief to rush in. Instead, something steadier arrived. Ownership. Not over assets, not over outcomes. Over myself. That afternoon, I made decisions I'd been postponing. Practical ones. Clean ones. I scheduled the house for sale, not because I couldn't stay there, but because I didn't want to. I didn't owe that space any more of my life just because it had once held a version of it. I boxed the last of his things without anger. No dramatic tossing, no hesitation, just efficiency. He hadn't reached out since the annulment. No apologies, no rage, no attempts to reframe the story one last time. That absence told me everything. People who believe they're entitled to forgiveness don't apologize. They wait. And I was done waiting. A few days later, I received a message from someone unexpected. His first spouse. Short, direct. I heard what happened. I'm sorry you got pulled into his mess. He did the same thing to me. Lies about everything. Disappeared without finalizing the divorce. I've been trying to serve him papers for 2 years. I stared at the screen longer than I expected to. Then I replied with the only thing that felt right. I'm sorry you went through that too. He's staying with his mother now. I hope this gives you closure. It felt like closing a loop I hadn't even known was open. That conversation did something important. It confirmed what my therapist had said. This wasn't about my judgment. It was about his pattern. That night I slept deeply. No dreams, no replay loops, just rest. In the days that followed, I noticed small shifts. I stopped explaining myself when people asked vague questions. I stopped softening the truth to protect his image. I stopped wondering how things might have been if I'd handled it differently. Because I had handled it right. Not perfectly, but honestly. And that was the turning point. When I stopped measuring myself by the damage he left behind and started measuring myself by what I refused to tolerate anymore. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need validation. I didn't need him to admit anything. I had my life back. Quiet, clean, uncomplicated. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like power. The fallout didn't come all at once. It arrived in waves, some loud, some barely noticeable, each one confirming that the truth, once exposed, keeps moving whether you participate in it or not. A few days after the annulment became public record, the messages started reaching me indirectly. Mutual friends checking in, acquaintances asking carefully worded questions, people who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly wanting context. I didn't volunteer explanations. When asked directly, I stated facts. No adjectives, no emotion. He had been legally married before. He never disclosed it. The marriage was never terminated. Our marriage was annulled on those grounds. That was it. Some people went quiet immediately. Others apologized for doubting me, for repeating things they'd heard, for assuming there were two sides. A few never reached out again. I noticed who disappeared when the truth became inconvenient. Then the consequences on his side began stacking up. His job found out. Not because I told them, because court records don't care about discretion. Bigamy isn't a private flaw. It's a legal one. His employer, already suspicious about his work trips, started asking questions. Unauthorized absences, misrepresented credentials, a pattern they could no longer ignore. He was fired. I found out through someone else, not him. The same way I found out about most things, secondhand, filtered, distorted by his need to frame himself as the victim of a cruel world. His family tried one last time. His sister sent a long email, emotional, accusatory, carefully crafted to make me feel responsible for the collapse of his life. He has nothing now, no job, no savings, no stability. You could help him get back on his feet. I read it once. Then I replied, "Your brother destroyed his own life through years of deception. I am not responsible for the consequences of his choices. Please do not contact me again." I blocked her. Blocked his mother. Blocked anyone who tried to reroute guilt back to me. That boundary felt final in a way nothing else had. The financial fallout followed next. Debt collectors began testing their luck, sending letters, making calls, probing for liability. My lawyer shut it down immediately. A single firm response outlining the annulment, the lack of marital obligation, and my zero legal responsibility for debts accrued in a marriage that never legally existed. They backed off. He apparently didn't. I heard, again, not from him, that he filed for bankruptcy, that he was staying with his mother, that his credit was ruined, that his sister blamed me for abandoning family. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sympathy, just distance. Our friend group fractured predictably. A few people clung to his version of events, preferring a softer lie over an uncomfortable truth. Others quietly stepped away from him once they realized how deep the deception ran. One friend admitted something that stuck with me. "We always thought something was off," she said. "But you seemed happy, so we didn't say anything." I nodded. That was the hardest part to accept. Not that people saw it before I did, but that manipulation often hides best inside stability. Then came the message I didn't expect, from his first spouse. "I finally got him served," the message read. "Divorce went through uncontested. Thank you for giving me the address." I stared at my phone for a long moment. "I'm glad you got closure," I replied. That was the last loose end. The last confirmation that this wasn't personal, it was cyclical. Financially, I came out intact. The annulment meant no asset division. The house was mine. The joint account funds were mine. His debts stayed his. Everything I'd built before him remained untouched. Emotionally, it took longer. There were days when I felt lighter than I had in years. Others when anger resurfaced unexpectedly, not at him, but at myself for having trusted so completely. But even that faded. Because every time doubt crept in, the facts stood firm. I didn't overreact. I didn't imagine things. I didn't destroy a good marriage. I ended a lie. The fallout kept moving outward, through his finances, his family, his reputation, while my life grew quieter by contrast. And for the first time, I understood something clearly. Peace doesn't arrive dramatically. It arrives when the chaos stops chasing you. 6 weeks after the annulment, my life finally felt quiet. Not empty, not lonely. Quiet in the way a room feels after a storm passes, when nothing is broken anymore, and you can hear yourself think. I sold the house. Not because I had to, but because I didn't want to keep living inside a memory that had been built on lies. I bought a smaller place closer to work. Fewer rooms, less noise, more light. It felt like a reset I chose, not one forced on me. I adopted a dog. He's cautious with strangers, watches carefully, trusts slowly. I respect that. I've learned to trust instincts like that now. People sometimes ask if I regret how I handled everything. If I should have been kinder, more forgiving, more patient with his past. The answer is no. He had 5 years to tell the truth. Multiple chances to come clean. Clear moments where honesty would have changed everything. Instead, he chose lies, consistently, deliberately. I didn't leave because he had a complicated past. I left because he built our entire relationship on deception and expected me to carry the cost of it. Protecting yourself is not cruelty. Documenting facts is not vindictive. Walking away from someone who lies about their identity, their finances, and their marital status is not heartless, it's necessary. For a long time, I thought strength looked like endurance, like staying, like trying harder. I was wrong. Strength looks like boundaries. It looks like refusing to be gaslit into doubting your own reality. It looks like choosing clarity over comfort. It looks like leaving, even when the other person insists you're the problem. I trusted someone because honesty makes sense to me. That wasn't a flaw. It was something he exploited. That distinction matters. If you're listening to this and something in your relationship doesn't add up, pay attention. If your questions are met with anger instead of answers, pause. If you're being told you're too sensitive for wanting the truth, believe the pattern, not the excuse. Lies about the past matter because they shape the future. Someone who hides a marriage will hide debts. Someone who falsifies credentials will falsify narratives. Patterns don't disappear. They escalate. I didn't ruin his life. I stepped out of it. And honestly, I'm okay. Better than okay. I'm free. If this story resonated with you, or if you've been through something similar, feel free to share your thoughts below. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, don't hesitate to pass it along.